Welcome to the NCDWI Guy podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI Guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 58 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, we have Michael Mogill in the house. Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp Video, the nation's #1 law firm growth company, as he'll tell you, the author of the game-changing attorney book. I'm holding it up right now. Get a copy. It's an amazing, amazing read. He's also the host of the Game Changing Attorney podcast and the founder of the Crisp Game Changers Summit, largest law firm growth conference on planet Earth. He's in the house today. He's helped thousands of attorneys from solo and small firms to large practices differentiate themselves from competitors and earn millions in new revenue. Michael's approach is to take everything he's learned, generating massive growth in his own organization, and help the country's most ambitious law firm owners do the same for theirs. So we are so excited to have Michael in on the podcast today. Amazing, amazing guest on the podcast today. So before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to share 2 upcoming events with you. The first is hosted by Michael Mogill and his company, Crisp. It is the Evolve Virtual Summit. It's coming up on June the 24th and 25th. Amazing growth conference that you can attend virtually from your own office. There is no reason, no barrier of entry to being able to attend this conference. You don't have to travel. Sign up for this. Seth Godin is going to be speaking, Marcus Lemonis, Eric Thomas, motivational speaker. A whole slew of incredibly gifted and well-known leaders in the legal industry are going to be speaking, as well as Michael himself. It's going to be an amazing conference so that you and your team can take your law firm to the next level. So make sure you sign up for that. Myself, and I think we've got 12 people of the team attending the Evolve Summit. So we are very much looking forward to that summit coming up in June. Secondly, just a reminder that next week we are starting our 5-part series on attacking the breath test. We've got an amazing list of guest speakers that are going to be on each episode for the next 5 weeks. So that's going to be for the whole month of June. So make sure that you're listening in next week. But with that, Michael, we're going to go ahead and dive into today's episode. Michael, you are a legend around the office. As a long-term Crisp client, it is an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that's always impressed me about you individually is kind of your ability to teach and kind of grow vision through storytelling. So you can kind of see this in the brand videos. Our firm brand video, which was kind of the first experience that we had as a firm with Crisp, really told this story of who we are and why we do what we do. And you had the ability to kind of communicate that story. Your team had the ability to communicate that story in a way that was helpful for our clients, our community, our team to be able to kind of see what we are about, who we are as a practice. And I think you, beyond just being able to tell other firm stories, have done an incredible job in terms of being able to communicate both internally and externally to your team and to other clients and firms who you are. So did that kind of gift of storytelling come naturally? Where did that come from?
Yeah, well, so for those that know my background, I guess some that don't, I started the business from nothing. I mean, I bootstrapped the business, $500 to my name. We never had any partners, no investors, no loans, none of that stuff. And I was building the business, even starting it out. I didn't know anything. Like I didn't know how to really market. I didn't understand sales. I didn't understand finance, any of this stuff. But what I did know was that there was a lot of competition and there was this necessity. I mean, in order to compete, I didn't have the resources to be able to compete with larger organizations. And we see the same thing with our clients. We work with, with law firms that they can't afford to, do all the TV advertising or billboards or radio or whatever it is. So how do you help that solo or small firm essentially bring in new business? And, especially if you can't match them on a lot of traditional media. So, I mean, if you can't be better, right? Or rather, I mean, people can say they're better, and especially we see this in the legal community where everybody's the best, right? From a consumer standpoint, if they went to like 5 different law firm websites in the same market in the same practice area, everybody's the best, right? Everybody's a super lawyer. So from the consumer side, it's hard to tell one firm apart from another. So it's in the standpoint, it's like there's an incremental value to really being better, but there's an exponential value to being different. And I think that's where, I realized this very early on with our business and, saw this with our clients as well, in the sense that if you can differentiate yourself, if you can stand out and you do so in the form of storytelling, you do so in the form of articulating what sets you apart, what makes you unique, what is your why, because people can provide similar legal services, but they do so for different reasons. So that gave our clients a fighting chance, right? So like at the very least, they now could differentiate themselves. And then there was a lower barrier to entry, let's say on social media or on digital, than you could see in traditional advertising. So this was kind of the first step in terms of like how David could take on Goliath, right? So, because if you went head to head on TV ads, I mean, they were already, doing the majority of the TV advertising in large firms. They were spending the most money on marketing. As a result, they were, bringing in the most cases, making the most money, and then putting that money back into marketing. It's not really a level playing field. So what do you do to help break that cycle? Well, you position yourself in a different way, you market in a different way, and that all came about through storytelling. So like when we started putting out these videos, legal for us going into that space and that industry years and years ago happened by accident. So when we started the company, we were working with just video for brands like Coca-Cola and Verizon and Red Bull. And then we started working some industries like, financial and tech and so on. But legal happened actually as a demonstration, I guess, of this proof of concept. We had a lawyer come to us. She had no online presence. She was struggling to stand out and differentiate. We produced videos for her. Her business exploded. And then we did it for another firm and another firm. And I realized like, here's an industry that's, super competitive, super saturated, and very commoditized. From a consumer side, like consumers have a difficult time, clients, like telling one firm apart from another. So what do you do? And it's through this type of storytelling. So that's really how it came to be.
Yeah. And I think that one of the most powerful pieces of the storytelling is, again, you can communicate to your clients who you are as an organization, but I also feel like getting the buy-in from employees. Obviously the brand video has kind of, been one of the most proud things that we put out there as a firm from a culture standpoint. But I think in terms of some of the coaching and a lot of the, conferences that you've spoken at, really kind of getting the buy-in and vision from your team, I think begins with the ability to kind of tell the story of your own business. So has that kind of rung true on your end in terms of how you've grown the firm or grown your organization?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and I used to think like, so this is so interesting because like things like your why and your unique value proposition and even down to like core values and so on. I thought that these would be like nice to haves. Like we'll figure that out once we're successful.
Exactly. That's right.
I realize it's the other way around, right?
Yeah, it is.
Like if you don't have like, let's say defined values for your organization, if you don't have like, your unique value proposition, how you're different, or even a clear why behind like what you do and what your purpose is, then it's very difficult to be committed to something. And it's also, you don't really have a clear message either to your audience, whether it's prospective clients or, whoever it is that you're trying to reach. So that's definitely been the case for us as well. It's almost like we've gone on this journey in tandem with our clients, right? As we were helping our clients, we were also, early on in the business, we were a very small company, and our clients' success, if this is still true to this day, really helped to build our success. So like if we could help them be successful, and this is kind of like, I guess, a model for life and business. Like if we could help others be successful, then as a byproduct of that success that we would grow. And, I used to, be, I guess, I don't know, like bashful or shy or whatever the word is around telling my story because I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. Like I grew up poor. My family and I, we immigrated from Eastern Europe. We came here, like we started with nothing. Like, it was a challenging upbringing. Like I didn't, have, some trust fund from like, or any necessarily like no loans, like I said, starting the business. And it wasn't the fact that I didn't want help. It's just, the banks weren't really willing to support, like, let's say a service-based business, like you first, at bat with a business like that. And I'm very grateful for that today. But, when I tell the story of like, my parents and like, the early days, like just, my upbringing, all these different things, I didn't want anyone to feel sorry. But what I found was just over time is that helped to humanize me, right? And now it was no longer like this young guy on stage, like telling people they should market their business and like do, differentiate their practice and think bigger and all this other stuff. Now I'd say, okay, well, this person has lived it, right? And this is why he actually cares about it, because I went through years and years and years of the same struggle and of the same suffering. And over time, you learn things, and like through these experiences, you kind of learn a better way. And that's why I'm also passionate about it, because like, it's like, if you go through that level of suffering as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, like, why would you not want to pay it forward and help somebody else? So, in a way, for me, my why and my value proposition really helps to build a lot of trust around the organization, because like now people can understand, well, why does he care? Oh, okay. It's because he's had this upbringing and this is how, it's impacted his life.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to kind of know that background. And I think in terms of how we learn as human beings, stories are so powerful in terms of how we are able to kind of learn. So, you can tell somebody, hey, you should just keep trying, even if you keep failing, you should keep trying. That's one way of kind of communicating the message, but it's a total another thing to be like, look, I went out to my first 21 potential deals, failed, didn't land a client. And then, call number 22, here's the road to success. But it took that many, opportunities to fail, and kind of going through that with your team, with your clients, whoever it is that you're kind of trying to convey that message to. Stories are so much more powerful in terms of the buy-in that is then received from people being like, okay, well, he doesn't just mean go out and keep trying. Like, he lived it. That's what he's talking about. That's the example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Like I look back and I never planned on these being stories I would tell later, because like when you're experiencing something that's like horrible or unfortunate, you're not thinking this will make a great story one day. I think that now, like after years of this and like looking back in hindsight. But I mean, I remember just, giving you an example early on when I started Crisp, we had hired our first employee, and like that alone was such a, this big leap of like having to be, responsible for another payroll besides your own, right? Like just to be able to like drive that type of business, and, someone else's livelihood, is on the line. And I remember we got close one time where I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to meet the payroll. And like, this was right as I was working, I think it was with a dentist at the time. And he's like, all right, well, I sent over, the agreement. He's like, I signed it. I faxed it back to you. This is back in like, I think it was like 2012 or maybe early part of 2013. And I was so excited because this was on a Friday, and it meant that we'd be able to continue to meet the payroll. And I went outside, I called my mom, and I was so pumped that like we could survive another 2 weeks. And I'll never forget that, like, so that fax came through, but it came through upside down. So it was like blank. So I called the dentist, and I was like, hey, I know you sent back the agreement. I'm really excited to work with you, but I think you faxed it upside down, right? So like, can you just fax it again, like right side up, because it was a blank page. And this guy took it as a sign from God that he should not move forward. And I'm crushed. Like I'm thinking, oh my God, like what am I going to do, right? And so obviously I worked through the whole weekend. I found an audiologist, like in the Midwest, like that on a video. So we were able to survive another 2 weeks. But like when you look back at like moments like that, you could tell someone, hey, remain persistent, hang in there. But I know how like the highs and the lows and how crushing it can be when you really need something to go a certain way. And growing a business is very unforgiving.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I brought in my first employee, who I still work with. He's got his own company now, but we use him as an interpreting service. But when I hired Henry, I was losing sleep over this decision whether to bring on this team member. That like first step of growth was just grueling. I can remember standing out on my back porch, like waiting to kind of like make this offer, pacing back and forth. And, I think it's one of the things that is so difficult for, most small businesses, but I would say specifically for lawyers because there is very little business background in law school, very little kind of conveyed on how to run a business. And so it's all trial by fire, trial and error. And I know that you went through a lot of that, started out in the, back office of was it a dental practice?
Yep. Yep. It was
So,
a dental practice.
basically started off small on your own. And, what would you say were some of the keys to kind of growing from, that solo business where you probably could have, crushed it as somebody that just did videos and kind of worked on your own, operated out of a small office, operated out of your home or wherever it might be. What were kind of keys along the way to kind of growing Crisp?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say early on, I know you mentioned like the dental practice. So a buddy of mine was a dentist. He had like built a dental office and he had like this back operatory he hadn't built out yet. So when I was starting Crisp, I wanted to have an office. And he's like, well, you can use this room until we build it out. So I went across the street to Office Depot and bought a desk and a chair. And, I had an office. And I look back on that and I'll say that like, from a very early period, and this is a good decision looking back on this. Like it wasn't fancy. It wasn't about having like, a cool office or nice furniture or whatever it is. Like I wasn't trying necessarily to impress anybody. It was really just trying to figure out how do I get this off the ground? Because you're funding it yourself and you have no money. And it's like, how do I run lean and do so in a way where we can be profitable as early as possible? And I think sometimes a lot of business owners make the mistake of trying to get very fancy early on.
Yes.
And rather than, because I was focusing on, okay, let's be very clear about like, what is our product offering going to be? Like, how can we ensure that this is going to be valuable to people? Let's get really clear about our message and let's get clear about our audience, all those different things. And I was focusing on that more than I was focusing on the quality of the furniture or the chairs or any of that.
Yeah, that's always resonated with me because I had a similar experience when I opened my practice. I started out working as a contract worker for a real estate attorney. And the deal was if I did 2 closings a month for him, that I could basically have a closet that was like literally we put a sectional divider up at the back of his office. I had a 12 by 10 space where both myself and then later my first employee both worked out of, like literally sitting back to back. When clients would come in, I would go meet with them in the conference room and then come back into my little cubicle. But that story's always resonated because keeping the overhead low was actually very freeing in terms of being able to grow things. Because again, it was kind of like, I had zero rent to worry about. There was no rental cost. As long as I kept doing those 2 closings a month, I was free.
Yeah, I mean, I look back, so I'm trying to think about like what were the key things early on, and it, like there's no way around it, or at least I have not found one through my experience and working with like, I mean, at this point, like hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs, but especially those early days. I mean, it's very hard to like say, here are the things that I won't do, or here's the work that I won't take on. Like, you're working your ass off. I mean, at that early period, at least if you're serious about building something, like you're really trading your time, right? Because it's where like that sweat equity comes from, where it is those long hours. It is, like it's a 24/7, 7 days a week type thing. And like at the time, like I didn't have the luxury of saying, well, I will take on this business versus this other business, or I won't work with this client. Like I found that over the years, like now, like we say no a lot, right? But I think that's a luxury to have, right? Like if you can't, like put food on the table, saying, no, I won't work with you because I don't like your attitude, I think is a very privileged situation to be in. So that was, early on, it was just like, look, we would do videos for anything. We filmed, bar mitzvah, we filmed a soccer tournament. I mean, I remember like one time we had this guy's secretary call us to film his son's soccer tournament because he couldn't be at the game or something. I'm like, hey, we'll be there, right? And I learned that's actually very awkward, right? If you're out there filming a small child, right? Like, so that in itself was a little odd. But then, as things started to grow, like, any money we made, I'd reinvest it back in the business. And I still do that to this day, right? I think it's a huge mistake with, you see this in a lot of entrepreneurs where the first time they make any real money, or they have a big case or whatever it is, and they take that money, like, I think that's a real critical point of like what your future will be. if you take that money and put it in your pocket and say, I've worked really hard, I deserve, a nice home, a nice car, or whatever it is, what you're really doing is like you're limiting the growth of the business. The firm owners, I think that hit that big case and reinvest that money back into the business grow exponentially, because they're focusing on, okay, like this is about the long term, right? I'm not going to take the first money we made out of the business. I'm going to continue to put it back in because I want to build something sustainable, and I want to make sure that we have the resources to do that. And then, the other thing I realized early on was that when we were very focused, right? So at each passing month, each year and so on, we got very, very clear on who we were for and then who we were not for. So meaning that, we started broad, like working with brands, any type of business. Then we started to hone in on certain industries. And then, once we landed on legal, that's the only thing we do, right? Like that was the only type of work we were doing. And, notice that wasn't like early on, day one. But 2-3 years in, we got very focused, and that allowed us to start to build a brand amongst a certain type of audience and really be seen as like the go-to. And then also, over the years, we've got, people have asked us, like, can you do websites? Can you do like live chat? Can you do whatever, right? And we could say yes to those things, but that's not really our core focus or our core competency. And so we stayed very, very narrow on video, and then it expanded to marketing and then expanded to coaching. But rather than focusing on what's the decision of what's going to, what does saying yes to mean in terms of, bringing in the most, revenue, the decision instead was, where is our core focus, our core competency, and what are we most, where can we add the most value? And that's really guided the decision making.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think it allows you, when you focus in like that, to be able to better tell your own story to clients. Who do we serve? What are we about? If you can kind of focus on that specific audience, we've been kind of, presented that kind of crossroads so many times in terms of, we are now a criminal defense firm that focuses on DWI. We used to do a bunch of other different areas, but we really do focus on DWI. And so there's so many times where it's kind of like, we could, expand out into traffic tickets or assault cases or these other things. We could build landing pages, but it's kind of like all of our branding is really focused on the person that is charged with driving while impaired. So it's not going to kind of necessarily sync well with that. And I think that in terms of that storytelling that you've been so good at doing for other firms, because again, for the new person that is starting out, obviously when people go to this attorney's website and that attorney's website, they're seeing the best of, and, all of the credentials. For the person that's just started out, they don't even have that on their website. So the storytelling is really where you can make a difference as a newer business, to be able to say, here's the reason why I went to law school. Here's the reason why I practice law. These are my interests, my passions, my hobbies. This is what my family is about. If you can humanize and connect with your client, potential client in that way, that's where I think you can pull somebody that would otherwise maybe be looking at this evaluation of, who's the best, who should I go with, and just say, well, I like this guy. This guy's somebody that I trust before I've even met him. When did you kind of build that into your own organization? Like, at what point did you kind of start saying, man, I got to stop telling other people's stories. I got to tell my own?
Yeah, it's always interesting. Like there's like the cobbler's kids shoes, the quote, but basically, we were doing this for our clients so much. And, for me, integrity is huge. So like, I always want us to be walking our talk, like whatever it is that we're doing for our clients, like if it works so well, and I'd say this business is overall, if like what you're doing works so well, then why aren't you also doing it for yourself, right? Like we believe in social media marketing, then and that's a service that we've offered. But, if it works so well, then we better be pretty aggressive on social. Like we outspend every single one of our clients on social media. So in terms of us integrating like that messaging in terms of our storytelling, our branding and so on, I mean, that came at really a few years in, because early on when we were marketing the business, like back in 2012, when I started the company, the messaging was really about like, why video, right? Like why you should get a video. Right. It's odd to me. Like back then, like you had to convince people that like video was like a good way to market or advertise, but like, but Facebook and YouTube and so on were a different thing. And every time I'd get on a phone call, I'd have to explain like, like you'd say the whole thing of like, Okay, well, here's how people like interpret information, and they could read words or they could hear sound, but like video's got all, you know what I mean? You have to like sell it, which is odd to me. And I think now it's ridiculous to even think about because of like how we consume content. Like people just, videos dominate most social platforms. It's how we get information. It's what engages emotionally. It's what humanizes, all those different things. So, once that was established, like we realized that rather than saying like, here's why video is important or here's why you need video or whatever, we instead could really show that through an example of articulating our own story of like, here's why we do what we do. And we told that story also through our clients. So it's one thing for us to say like, here's how video helps you grow. And it's another thing for our clients to like share like how that impacted them and how it transformed their practices, along with our own story of growing and evolving. It was like this, this interesting symbiosis. And by the way, Jake, I just realized trains only go by, if you heard that sound, they only go by during podcasts.
That's good. Yeah.
So the guy that like mows the lawn outside, he only mows it during podcasts, and then trains only happen during podcasts.
That's awesome. Yeah, my office is right by our front door. So there's a lot of like traffic that goes in and out of the, right next to the door, especially when there's a recording going on. So I can definitely feel that sentiment. But yeah, I think that is such a important thing to kind of think about in terms of, how important it is to communicate with that. And, I think when clients are looking for an attorney, when they're looking for somebody that they are going to connect to, that message can be just so powerful. I remember one of the first attorneys kind of in our market that had seen our brand video basically came up to me is like, first of all, I said, how much did you pay for that brand video? That was his first question, was how much you paid for that brand video? So I told him, and he was like, you know what happened when I watched that video? At the end of the video, he was like, I felt hope. And he was like, that's what you were, that's what you communicated. He was like, it was just an incredible feeling of hope. He's like, I wasn't even charged with the DWI. I wanted to be represented by you guys. It's just like,
it's like, when you really think about it, like what you're really trying to answer with a video is like, why should, like, let's say someone who doesn't know you, like when they visit your website or they see you on social or whatever it is, they're really trying to answer the question of like, why should I hire you and not your competitor, right? Like how, and if you can't answer that question, if they get to the website and they just, they see aggressive representation or,
right,
they see something that like, it's the same thing on 3 different websites, they can't make a decision. So
right,
the reality of it is like, but if you can answer those questions, if you can tell your story, if you can humanize, like if you get them to like feel anything even emotionally, right? Because you said it earlier, if they just like you, if they connect with you, right, that also forms the basis of trust. Like we could get into the whole like, chemical, neurochemical side of like oxytocin and all that too, that's emitted. But that helps to create those types of connections where they're like, okay, I feel like I know this person. They've got a family of their own. I understand why they do this. And, it's not to say that they won't like some competitor. They just have no connection whatsoever to them. Like they don't feel anything about it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's so critical to have that emotional connection. And the earlier that you can do that, the better, which is why referral-based marketing works, because you've already got the trust built in before the call is ever made, before the first time that you've ever talked to that person. That video does very much the same thing. In terms of kind of the growth that you've gone through, now 8-figure company, you work with many 8-figure law firms, you huge team at Crisp. You guys do so many different things in terms of coaching and obviously the social media marketing, still doing the videos. If you could kind of go back in time to, 7-8 years ago when you were first kind of getting your video company off the ground, what would you kind of take back now that you have, built yourself to where you are company wide? What would you take back to kind of Michael from 8 years ago?
Yeah. It's the first thing that came to mind. And I think this has evolved over time, but the sooner you like gain this, like evolution, the more, the sooner you make progress. And for me, it was like, your standards evolve, your non-negotiables increase. And, when I look back over the years, I think we're all guilty of this, but, when we work with certain people or we hire certain people or so on, like, we're so tolerant of things that, perhaps we shouldn't be tolerant of. I look back and there's people that I kept around way too long, like, where it was at the detriment of the business, right? Like hoping that they would get better, hoping that they would improve and so on. And, I'll take responsibility early on when we didn't have, like, let's say any training or onboarding or development. Like if someone like that didn't succeed, it was entirely my fault, right? But then at the same time, we have the people that, that had the excuses, right? Like, why couldn't they make it to work in time? Why couldn't they do the thing they said they were going to do? And, we always, like, whenever I say this, there's always someone that like comes to mind, right? Like we're all thinking about someone that we put up with for too long. And really what happens there is like, you're basically saying that like, whatever we say our values and standards are, right? They're really what we tolerate. Right. So like if we see something that's off culture and we let it ride, if you will, then that becomes the new culture. And, as the standards have increased, like I would cut bait early, like now, but like as those standards have grown and increased, we've surrounded ourselves with just amazing people, right? Like
so important.
And people are everything. At the core of it, you can have like, when people say, hey, I can't find good help, or I don't think that help is out there, or whatever it is. Oftentimes what happens is like, one is, well, how much time are you actually spending trying to find that person, right?
Yes.
And then two, like maybe you hired too early before you found the right one, because, with the right person, it frees you up. You have an accountable, human being. It helps you grow and scale the organization, increases the capacity of the firm, all those different things. And, I realized that, at a certain point, like I could only do so much. Like I had to help bring in a great team. And, and that was also going to be a function of the type of environment and culture we were going to create. But if anything goes, then the best people didn't want to work in that type of environment.
That's the real problem, I think. I mean, for us, we are kind of at the, height of where we are organizationally, the culture that we have right now. And it's just been so, incredible coming to work in that environment where everybody is kind of, ready to play for the team, work hard, have a great time. But it's amazing how one person that isn't on board with the mission can really change the dynamic of, everybody else that's pushing 100%. I mean, it's an amazing thing to see how one person can kind of totally change the dynamic of the company. And one of the worst parts of that, like you just said, is it changes your A players, right? Like, I mean, it basically has them fed up. It's kind of like this guy is not kind of making the decisions that need to be made that are best for the organization. So it loses trust in you as a leader. So that's really been a critical piece.
Yeah, I mean, the saying goes, it's like reputation precedes revenue. And what I mean by that is that, like, rather than focusing on, because a lot of firms look at it and say, we've got a revenue problem, we need more cases, we need more calls, we need, more money coming in or whatever it is. The reality of it is, it's not really the revenue that you're solving, it's more so the reputation. And what I mean by that is that's everything from your results, your client experience, like even down to like the culture of the firm, like what is it like working with you? Because so much of the business, like long-term, is going to come in as a function of your clients or your partners referring you new business. And then it comes down to like, what is your culture? What types of people do you attract to your organization? Like everybody wants the best lawyers, right? But why would the best lawyers want to work at your firm, right? So you have to create the type of environment and the type of brand, if you will, that they want to gravitate to. Like they want to work with the best. So, if you solve the reputation problem, then like the revenue is really a byproduct of that. So, I mean, looking back, I'd say like raising the non-negotiables, and this to me like really hit a tipping point when, our first daughter was born, because, for me, it was really important to be in her life. And as much as I wanted to grow the business, I also wanted to be a great dad, and being home for bath time for me was a non-negotiable. Right. But, going into that, I realized, well, hey, there's going to be no way I can be out of the office at 6 p.m. if I'm putting out fires until 8 p.m. So like, but that's, if I can't be home in time for bath time, then why am I doing any of this? So the standards increased, the non-negotiables increased. Why was I at the office late? Well, maybe it was because I was putting out fires. And why was I putting out fires? Well, it's because there were people that either weren't doing the things they said they were going to do, or weren't as committed to the organization, to our clients. And we had to wipe all that out. We had to raise the bar. And as a result, the organization grew tremendously. And it all came because I just wanted to be home for bath time. And I just wanted to be able to be out, at 6 o'clock. So, but I had to create the type of environment and attract the type of help, if you will, that would have allowed me to do that. And that only happened once I raised the standards of saying, look, this is unacceptable. I'm not going to be at a place where people like, show up late, or I'm not going to be at a type of place where like, people aren't engaged or aren't committed, or, we remove these things as an option. And we say, look, there's a lot of places you can work, but we don't want any hostages here. Like we want, volunteers that really want to be here, that are aligned with the vision, that are aligned with the core values. And we're not trying to be the best place to work for all of America. We just want to be the best place to work for high accountable driven people.
Right.
So, that was the other thing. And, and as a result, I think life gets a lot better when you're very clear on like what you will accept and what you won't. But just know this, it's not a non-negotiable when that thing goes off track, if you tolerate it, right? Like non-negotiables,
right.
They're only non-negotiables if you don't tolerate it.
Yeah. I think in terms of having priorities straight, that is critical. You said for, you personally, being home for bath time, that's kind of like where does the priority lie between kind of personal and professional life? And I think so many of us, because, as a business owner, you get kind of wrapped up in your business, forget what is my business serving, right? Is it serving, my personal life the way I need it to serve? Is it serving my community? Is it serving my employees? Am I able to kind of give them, additional training, education, the life that they want to have? These kind of lifestyle firms, I think, are really important because they show, they have their priorities in line in terms of where they're going to be spending their time. And I think if you don't have that prioritization right, then somebody else is going to jump in and make their problem your priority. I mean, especially when it comes to lawyers, where we are kind of in the business of helping through putting out fires, helping other people kind of get their life back on track. If we don't have kind of clear guidelines of this is why I'm doing what I do, this is what I want, my personal life to look like, my relationships outside of work, inside of work to look like, it's just going to go off the rails and be on somebody else's agenda.
I agree. And I'll tell you this, I think it's hard to help people at scale if you can't help yourself first, right? And meaning that if you're exhausted, if you're stressed out, if you're overwhelmed, if things in your office are a mess, things in your personal life are a mess, like how can you really provide the best legal representation for your clients, right? Like, would you want to hire somebody like that just, isn't even present wherever they are, or is like exhausted and burnt out? Like probably not. So
I always say you can't give what you don't have. You can't give to somebody else what you don't have. And so, one of the things in terms of even like when it comes to substance abuse, if we have clients that are struggling with that, which as DWI attorneys, that's definitely a lot of people that walk in the door. If you have an issue on that front yourself, it's going to be very difficult to kind of help somebody else that's struggling with that same thing. But it applies to all other kind of problems in your own personal life. You can't give what you don't have to your client.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I will say this. I mean, so it's interesting. My perspective on this has changed over the years, meaning that like, I think people should, whatever someone wants, I think make sure that, you commit to the things you want. So, I wanted to build a great organization, make a massive impact, all of that. But like, I think people's goals are their goals. Like they, maybe they don't want to build like, let's say a $50 million organization. That's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think whatever it is, ultimately, like you yourself should be sold on your future first, right? Because if you're doing something for any other reason or for some reason that, let's say, you're not excited about that future, then I don't think you'll ever do the things necessary to actually achieve it. So whatever you set, make sure like you sell yourself first of saying, okay, well, here's what I see as our vision, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, let's say 10 years from now. And that's got to be exciting to you, because if it's not exciting, I mean, if it's like, hey, that would be nice, if we grew, our revenue by 5%, but it doesn't really allow us to, we would just be doing the same things, then, how committed would you be to that? And then like, let's say, you have to make a certain decision, you have to invest financially or whatever it is, like, you're going to hesitate because you're not like, it won't change your life to achieve whatever that goal is. So this is another thing I've learned over the years, that you're better off setting like a higher goal and having a vision that excites you. So like when we've done, I mean, I know you talked about the conferences and like we've grown the company and so on, like every year that's represented what we call is like transformational growth. Meaning that allowed us to do things in a different way that we couldn't previously do before. Like we could either support our clients at a higher level, we could expand the capacity of our team, we could move into a new office, like whatever it was, it allowed us to do something that we couldn't do before. And that was so exciting to be able to achieve that we were very committed to it.
Well, I know we're kind of running out of time, Michael, but I'll have one more question for you, which is a question that you pose at the end of your podcast. So you're the game changing attorney, right? You're the author of the Game Changing Attorney book. You got the Game Changing Attorney podcast. You've got the Game Changer Summit. So you end your podcast this way with what does being a game changer look like to you, to each of your guests? So what does being a game changing attorney look like since you have dealt with that with so many firms?
Yeah, I mean, so this is different things to different people. I have found that the ones that are like, because I asked this question a lot. I mean, now over 50 times I've asked this. And I found the ones that are like most passionate, most driven, have achieved the most things, like to them being a game changer is like they're doing this without necessarily a destination in mind. Like it's like an infinite game. Like they
Right.
genuinely enjoy the process. They are so aligned with like the work they do, their role. Like they're excited to go to work every single day. It doesn't mean that every day is a great day, but it means that like there's nothing else they'd rather be doing. And in the sense that like they are like they have no plans of retirement. Like they could have retired, long ago. But to them, they always want to see, okay, well, I'm passionate, I'm engaged, I'm excited. Like, how much impact can I make, right? Like, how far can I push it? How do I continue to grow and expand my capabilities? So to me, a game changer is someone who plays this infinite game, where it's not like once I hit this level, I'll be satisfied, or I'll put my, take my foot off the gas. Like there's, just some, immediate goal. It's more about like, okay, once, we hit this level, now we're going to expand that vision. We're going to continue to make impact, and it's fun and exciting. So I think it's good to be in that type of position, and it has nothing to do with money. Like I think that's the most interesting thing. It has more so to do with like whether it's helping as many people as they can, whether it's making the greatest impact, or if nothing else, living up to their own potential of saying that like, look, I didn't leave anything on the table. I came into this earth. I could have made this impact. And, I'm trying to match what I could have done. Right. Cause like, what's the saying, right? Like, it's like the first day of hell where like, the person you are meets the person you could have become. Yeah. So like, I mean, that's depressing. And they want to know like, look, I didn't leave anything on the table, but they're very clear on who they are, what they do and why they do it. And as a result, they're very, like authentic and congruent with themselves on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I love that. I think that the kind of infinite mindset for this quarter, our theme is the infinite game. We're all reading Simon Sinek's Infinite Game book. And so it's just been, I agree. I think that just having this mindset of it's never going to be over, right? But we're going to constantly be learning, constantly be improving what we offer, constantly be improving the culture, our lives, our families, the community. It's never going to end. That's what makes it fun, I believe, as well. So, well, Michael, I appreciate very much you coming on to the podcast. Again, for the listeners, the Crisp Evolve Summit is at the end of June. Make sure that you sign up for that. It's my entire team is excited about being there for the Crisp Crisp Evolve Summit. Great lineup of speakers. I'm just pumped about it. My team is pumped, so we're looking forward to it. Really appreciate you being on the podcast, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
If you found the information in this podcast to be valuable, I simply ask that you pay it forward and share this podcast with another member of the legal community. Also, if you would leave us a rating or a review on whatever platform you're listening on, I would greatly appreciate it.